Hi everyone, my name is Abigail Deneverville. I'm an author, and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about something that has been on my mind for a while now, and that's the question whether or not I want an agent. To briefly recap my publishing journey, I did originally start out by querying agents as early as 2017. And I can't remember how many queries I sent, but I just kept getting no's. And it was obviously not fun. It was disheartening because at the time, my novel I felt was a little bit on the fringes of what was popular. And it was difficult at the time to know whether my book was getting rejected because of the quality of the writing or because of the content, because my novel had a bisexual main character, and those weren't super common at that point in YA. And I felt like that might have played a part. So I took part in one of these Twitter pitch contests, and the only like I got for this contest was a small queer press. And after checking them out, I decided to submit my novel, and they published me. Looking back on it now, that I'm a little bit older, and I recently did go through my book and re-edited it and republished it under my own name instead of through the publisher. And I think I probably was rejected because of the quality of the writing, not so much because the content. Because, yeah, there are parts of the book that I think were really well done, and then there are other parts that are very clunky, overdramatic, all that stuff. And the publisher didn't do a ton to edit it besides line edits. We didn't do a big developmental edit or anything like that. Sometimes I look back and I wonder what would have happened if I had just stuck it through with the query process and I reworked it some more and I got a traditional deal. How would the book have turned out? That said, I don't regret the path that I took, because I think that especially the newest version that I just republished is the closest to my original vision that I had when I first wrote it. And if I had a traditional deal, I would not be able to do a do-over, for one thing. And they also might have wanted me to change aspects of it that I wouldn't have wanted to change. So I think the path I took was the right one, but I don't know if it's the right one for me anymore. And I think now that I'm a bit older and wiser, navigating something like agent queries might be a bit easier. But there are a lot of questions to ask oneself before going on this journey. Right now, I don't have anything that's ready to be queried, but I'm always looking towards the future and thinking ahead. And I've been doing a lot of reevaluating of my writing career and my output and everything, because I've been at this for 6 years now. No, 7. I've been at this for 7 years now, and I don't really feel like I've made any kind of progress with retaining my audience and keeping readers engaged with my career. So that's got me thinking a lot about what I should do next. When I first set out on this journey, going through a small indie publisher and not being agented, I was convinced that I didn't want to find an agent because I liked the freedom that the indie publisher provided. I signed a contract for one book and I didn't have to commit to anything more. So if for whatever reason I didn't enjoy my experience with them, I could just not query them again and that would be it. And the other thing I liked was that they did retain my original vision completely. Like, they just did line edits, they didn't do developmental edits. And I do kind of wish that they had now, because I think the manuscript was a bit unfocused. At the same time, though, keeping the original vision and not censoring me was obviously something that I really respected and appreciated. When I started to get more involved in the writing side of social media, like before I was a reader, I used to do book reviews on here. Um, when I started to get on the writing side of things and I announced my book was coming out, I made friends with other writers and I found other writers to follow. And I would see so many situations where the writer was unhappy with their publisher, like a big traditional deal publisher type thing. Like one writer I remember said that their book was basically being held hostage by the publisher because the publisher wanted them to change certain aspects of the plot. There were certain parts of the story that had sensitive content, and the publisher kind of wanted to sanitize it. And this writer was not happy about that. And that caused a lot of friction, and the book kept getting delayed. And I think it did eventually come out, but it didn't come out first. They ended up releasing a different book as their debut. And eventually, the book that was supposed to be their debut did come out, but I don't know the story behind that. And I had heard other stories of people saying that they would propose a book idea to their agent, and their agent would say, I don't know, I don't really like that idea. And that would be that. Like, even if it was the best book you've ever written or whatever, if your agent didn't want to champion it, that was kind of it. So to me, it did not sound like the most ideal of circumstances. And although I did think that a big traditional deal would help in a lot of ways, I didn't want to have to deal with the negative stuff. But now that I'm a bit older and I feel like my ideas are less precious to me in a lot of ways, probably because I have released several books and I feel a little more desensitized to the process of releasing a book and having people read it and judge it. I feel like I'm ready to possibly go through the pains of traditional publishing and deal with the negative as well as the positive. When I was younger and I just started out, I thought that being published by an indie press meant that you were being traditionally published. And it was only after I started to get involved in writer circles on social media that I realized that there was a distinction. And I won't say that anyone outright said to me, your book doesn't count or you're not a legitimate writer. And I feel like readers as well would put more value in a book that was traditionally published or even in a person who had an agent over someone who was independently published. Like I said, no one ever said anything to me specifically, but that was just kind of the vibe I felt. I just felt like I didn't quite fit in because I wasn't self-published and I wasn't traditionally published, and it was just a weird middle ground to be in. Eventually I did end up self-publishing. I decided to part ways with the publisher and I got my rights back. And then I felt like I belonged a little bit more in the self-publishing circles. So I have been thinking about whether or not I want an agent for many years. And when I first started out with my career and I realized that there was a difference between small press and traditional publishing, I thought maybe I should try to find an agent. But the only reason why I was thinking that is because I wanted other authors to see me as a legitimate peer. And I wanted readers to take me seriously. And I thought to myself, if that's the only reason why I want an agent, I shouldn't go down this path. Like, I should only go through with it if I feel like it's going to be a good experience for me instead of just wanting to fit in. I decided to just continue on with self publishing. But now, after I've been self publishing for, I think, like 3 years. No, it has to be more than that. My third book was the first one that I self-published, and it came out in, I think, 2023. I had also self-published poetry, but that's a bit different. Poetry, at least modern poetry, has more of a reputation for self-publishing, and there's more acceptance, I want to say, towards self-published poetry. A lot of the really popular poets that we know now started out self-published. Yeah, I feel like there's a bit less of a weird attitude towards people who self-publish poetry versus novels. I could be wrong though. I mean, it's been probably 10 years since the Insta poetry stuff really took off, and I know that there's lots of heavy criticism, but people still buy poetry when it's self-published. Like, out of all of the stuff I've self-published, my poetry always does the best. I think it's something that people are more willing to take a chance on. If they find a book just randomly on Kobo or something, they're more likely to pick up a poetry book just for the heck of it than they would be to pick up a random indie novel they'd never heard of before. Self-publishing my novels, I've noticed some things. The big thing is I don't really sell many copies. And that's not for lack of trying. You know, like I've had my times where I've been way too burnt out and depressed to think about doing any kind of self promotion. But I've also had my times where I've really tried to go get her and really put myself out there, and it's just not really working. And I'm getting to the point where I know that I have to make a big change. And I've talked about switching it up and writing in a different genre. Even if I move to a genre where indie books tend to do better, there's no guarantee, obviously. And I think I'm just tired of waiting and hoping. So when I was younger, the main reason that I could see getting an agent and going through with a traditional deal is to be seen as legitimate by my peers and by other readers. But I don't necessarily feel that way anymore. Like, not every reader is super online and knows who the hottest writers are and who has the best agents. Most readers are just going to be picking up random books at a bookstore or at the library and just going off of vibes. And I think that's what the problem is now, is that if I'm self-published and no one knows who I am and my books aren't in stores or on library databases, then I'm not going to get any kind of a readership. And I've tried to get myself on library databases. I've put them up on Overdrive and Hoopla and the whole shebang, and I've requested my library to carry my books. And I've had some varying degrees of success, but overall, it's not like this is the golden ticket. And the same thing with bookstores. Like I've reached out to independent bookstores. I reached out to Indigo as well to get my stuff on their catalog, and it's now on the catalog. But if no one knows that it's there, then no one's going to buy it. And having an agent who can sort of champion your book and push it forward and get it places that you wouldn't necessarily be able to get it otherwise would be a huge help. I think the issue is, like, money is tight for a lot of people and people aren't willing to take chances on books anymore. They want books that are curated and that have good reviews and are well liked by a lot of people, and that can't happen when you're selling like one copy a month, if that. I do feel like the time has come for me to start getting in the query trenches. And I feel like I'm at the point in my life where I I think I can wait for that to happen. Like, I think before I did feel some internal pressure that I had to do all these things before I turned 30, or I had to release a book every year in order for people to remember who I am. And I'm ready to just slow that all down and just let whatever happens happens. Like, I'm already 32, so and I think it's better to take things slow than to rush through them and just go through the motions in the hopes that if you do all these things in the right order, something good's gonna happen. Like, I just really think that I need help. I just think that I need someone in my corner who can really champion me, and that's what I would hope that an agent would do. Obviously, there's some bad agents. There's some agents who are not the greatest at getting good deals and stuff like that, but I want to give it a shot at least. You won't know until you try, you know? I don't know, maybe having an agent and eventually getting a deal, maybe the excitement from all that would boost the sales of my old stuff, but I don't know. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I hope that you enjoyed listening to me chat about this. And if you are a writer and you're also wondering whether or not to get an agent, let me know. I would love to hear your opinions and what your experience has been so far. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.